First reading from the book of Genesis on today and homily. It's the second Sunday of Lent, year B, but the gospel, of course, is the Transfiguration. A reading from the book of Genesis. God put Abraham to the test. "Abraham, Abraham," he called. "Here I am," he replied. "Take your son," God said, "your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah. There you shall offer him as a burnt offering on the mountain I will point out to you." When they arrived at the place God had pointed out to him, Abraham built an altar there and arranged the wood. Then he stretched out his hands and seized the knife to kill his son. But the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven. "Abraham, Abraham," he said. "I am here," he replied. "Do not raise your hand against the boy," the angel said. "Do not harm him, for now I know you fear God. You have not refused me your son, your only son." Then looking up, Abraham saw a ram caught in the horns in the bush. Abraham took the ram and offered it as a burnt offering in place of his son. The angel of the Lord called Abraham a second time from heaven. "I swear by my own self, it is the Lord who speaks. Because you have done this, because you have not refused me, your son, your only son, I will shower blessings on you. I will make your descendants as many as the stars of heaven and the grains of sand on the seashore. Your descendants shall gain possession of the gates of their enemies, and all the nations of the earth shall bless themselves by your descendants as a reward for your obedience." The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. One day, a man was walking through a field deep in reflection. He stood in awe before a huge oak tree, reflecting on the tiny acorns lying on the ground. These had fallen off in the wind. He then looked across the fence at a huge field of pumpkins, each one growing on a tiny vine branch. Suddenly he had a thought. God made a mistake, surely. Why should the huge pumpkins be on tiny vines while the tiny acorns grow on a huge oak tree? He's got it the wrong way around. It doesn't make any sense. Just then, there was a gust of wind, and a tiny acorn fell from the oak tree, and plump hit him straight on the head. He smiled a rather wry smile and thought, maybe God knew what he was doing after all. Yes, God can appear to be behind the strangest of things. Take the case of Abraham. He was asked to sacrifice his only son Isaac. Surely in this case, God must have made a mistake. He must have forgotten he just promised Abraham numerous descendants. However, Abraham doesn't see God's distressing request as outrageous as he might have done, but in steadfast faith he embraces it. He's a lot like Mary, who found the conception of Jesus a bit of an enigma at first, but then falls in line with God's plan by saying to the angel Gabriel, "Let what you have said be done to me." Now that's faith. Abraham's steadfast faith in God's promises is actually rewarded. He's not called our Father in faith for nothing. The angel calls a halt when Abraham is about to sacrifice his only son. But in stark contrast, God does not spare his own son, but he gave him up to benefit us all. Last Sunday, we saw where Jesus' faith was put to the test in the wilderness. Jesus rebuffed the devil's temptations because in satisfying the cravings of the body, like turning stones into bread, or having worldly power, like owning all the kingdoms of the world as Satan proposed, this would have put him out of kilter with the will of his Father, whose kingdom is not of this world. To test our faith, God sometimes, metaphorically speaking, can tug at the rug under our feet in the hope that we entrust ourselves and our future more fully into His hands. But for some it has the opposite effect, I'm afraid. When their faith is tested, they turn their backs on God altogether. Abraham made that leap of faith when at God's invitation he was willing to sacrifice his only son. Now, coming to the transfiguration scene, Moses and Elijah were also men of great faith. Against all the odds and fraught with great danger, Moses led his people out of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. Elijah risked his life by stamping out pagan worship in Israel, which the wicked queen Jezebel had promoted. That is why we find Moses and Elijah standing shoulder to shoulder with Jesus on Mount Tabor. Tradition has it that, like Jesus, they were taken up in glory to heaven at the end of their lives. I think it's a fitting reward for their unwavering faith. We imitate these three great worthies of the Old Testament, Abraham, Moses, and Elijah, when we willingly in faith allow God to mold and fashion our lives into the persons that He wants us to be. By so doing, transfiguration awaits us too. Now, thank you all for listening, and God bless you all.